Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Ha ha ha. So many people, over just one little thing like this. Stealing it was the right choice. Wonder how many people will freak when I escape with it. A young male spoke, most of him disguised, as he looked at a small, rounded, metal device that he had no idea what it was. He wore an orange hoodie with the hood pulled up to cover his hair, and over his hoodie he had a red cloak with black flames near the bottom of it. Covering his mouth and cheeks, he wore a medical mask, and he had on black pants to go with his orange hoodie. He was on the shorter side, being 166 centimeters in height, not overly tall for a guy, but he was muscular to match with it. Blonde hair peeked out from under his hood, and he had orange markings around his yellow eyes with bar-shaped pupils. He was on the top of a building, surrounded by 3 heroes. They had been called in by the police to arrest him, after he had stolen the weird little object that he had in his hands. Give it up, we have you cornered. A massive man, 205 centimeters tall, with massive muscles and a large, square jaw. He had thick metal bands around his wrists, and his abs were on display since his hero costume was skin-tight and didn't cover everything. Spiked back white hair, and his fists slamming together to show that he was ready for a fight. Death Arms, right? The teenager asked with a grin under his mask. Cool, you're a pretty big name. But not as big as All Might. He had 2 pretty big name heroes after him, and a hero who was in the top 10. I was more than enough to handle a simple thief. Don't see why you 2 needed to be called in. I didn't need any help in this. A tan-skinned, tiny and muscular woman spoke with a confident grin. She was even shorter than the thief, 159 centimeters in height, and contrasting her tan skin was long white hair and red eyes, as well as her long white bunny ears instead of human ones. She had an attractive body, barely hidden by a white leotard with a yellow moon on it, white gloves, and purple thigh-high stockings. He broke into a highly secured vault, and stole a very expensive item. They called in those best suited for this situation. A scruffy man, also a tall 183 centimeters, with long black hair and a scruffy face, as well as yellow goggles on. He wore all black, except for his gray scarf that seemed overly large. Mirko. And Eraserhead. You're super hot. And you're scruffy. The teen pointed to the 2 of them in turn. He might be in a little bit of trouble. PPFFFFFT. Scruffy. You're a scum for being a villain, but I like the way you speak. Mirko spoke as she pointed back at the villain. She tensed her legs and rushed off at him faster than a speeding rabbit. He jumped up a clear 25 feet into the air and dodged her, landing on the opposite side of the rooftop on his hands. She didn't hesitate to crack the rooftop when she changed directions and chased after him. Without looking at Mirko, he ducked underneath her kick, and turned his head to look at her face from between her cleavage, with her looking down at him. Death Arms threw a punch at the villain, and it was dodged as well, slamming into the rooftop and getting his fist stuck in it. Mirko put her feet on his chest, and kicked off of him to chase after the villain. He's got some kind of quirk that gives him excellent spatial awareness. Eraserhead's eyes glowed red, and his hair stood up, as he activated his own quirk and stopped the quirk of the villain they were facing. He threw his scarf out and shot himself towards the villain, who threw himself off the top of the building to escape his line of sight. Mirko stopped at the edge of the building, looking down. You guys are going to slow me down. I've got this. Mirko jumped off the building after him, and she saw blinked when he touched the side of the building with his hand and stuck to it. She kept falling though, passing him, and she grinned when she realized he had jumped, knowing that she would jump after him. He jumped onto the side of another building, so she kicked the side of the building and followed after him. In mid-air, she threw a kick at him as she passed him by, faster than him, but he ducked in the air and flipped as he reached the next building. He jumped through the air again, and she chased after him in their mid-air fight the second she could get her foot onto the side of another building. In minutes, they had already traveled far away from their starting building, Eraserhead and Death Arms long since left behind in the chase. She's practically flying. This is so much fun. The thief thought as he landed on the side of the building, and he felt her coming behind him. Instead of jumping, he did a backflip, and allowed her to kick the side of the building, her body breaking right through the glass, while he landed on the same building upside down, sticking to it, having just fallen a few feet. He waited for her. You're not getting away from me. Where the hell did he go? Mirko shouted as she ran to the edge of the broken glass, and looked out into the distance. He had to have jumped to try and escape from her, That was what he had been doing for minutes now. The thief pushed off the building with his hands, front flipping so that he stood right in front of her. Pushing his medical mask up just enough so that his lips were visible, he gave her a swift kiss on the lips, before he pulled back when she out of instinct kicked where he had been. Pulling his mask back down, she glared at him for the kiss. Consider that a thanks for the fun chase. You slipped me tongue, you bastard. You've got some balls, I'll give you that. Mirko saw the thief jump again, and she chased after him. A fiery passion to kick him in her eyes, she went full speed, breaking part of the building she jumped out of. She looked him eye to eye as he flipped through the air, her body sailing underneath him as he landed on top of the roof of a shorter building, and she went clean over it. As soon as she landed, she jumped after him. Oddly enough, he was standing completely still on the building, waiting for her to join him. He was looking at his wrist, which had a watch on it. She blinked in surprise, no doubt he was checking to see how long he had escaped from her. That time was over now, because she was going to end this. 5. 4. She landed. 3.2 inches, so, you decided to give up, Mirko started to say, before she suddenly felt extremely weak, and dropped to her hands and knees. All of her strength having left her body, and she saw him grinning down at her, his mouth visible again. Point 1. As hot as you are, that kiss was for more than just a thanks for the fun. I didn't just slip you tongue, I slipped you poison. Don't worry, it's not lethal dose or anything, but once it kicks in, it really packs a kick. The thief stated to her as he leaned down to her level once her arms started to shake from the effort of holding herself up. She barely had the energy left to even glare at him. He pulled out a knife. Shit. Mirko thought as he brought it closer to her. He cut open a hole in her leotard, right between her breasts, exposing cleavage. Pulling the stolen device out of his hoodie pocket, he dropped the device between her breasts. She fell onto her side, her arms not even able to holding her up anymore. Oh, I don't even want this thing, I just knew stealing this would be an awesome way to start this thing out. I'm not interested in stuff like this. The thief said as he pulled out a marker, and he drew a spiral on her breast, right above her heart. Grabbing onto her wrist, he started to strip her gloves off of her hands, taking both of her gloves. And now to collect my first trophy. Thanks, Bun Bun. You can say you were able to steal that back from me, I don't mind. I've got what I wanted. He put her gloves in his pocket, and walked backwards towards the edge of the building. You bastard. My villain name is Kurama, remember that. With that, he was gone, taking a single step off the side of the building and dropping down into the alley below. Cursing her luck, but unable to follow him, she was forced to stare down at her ungloved hands. With Kurama. Phew, that one was closer. If she had actually hit me, I would have been screwed. Kurama spoke as he got out his phone and started to call somebody. Pulling the mask off his face, and taking his cloak off, folding it up and pulling it into his hoodie front pocket. His whisker-marked cheeks were revealed, and as he pulled down his hoodie his golden spiky hair was fully revealed. The person he called answered the phone. Sup Naruto, what are you calling about? Are you watching the news? Naruto asked with a wide grin across his face. He wondered if he had made news yet. He really wanted to see if his first crime had made national TV, or just local television. All Might stopped a weird villain from stealing some kid's body, but otherwise it was a pretty slow news day. Naruto clicked his teeth in annoyance, before he hung up his phone. It seemed like he needed to have a repeat performance. I like tall women with big tits, but this is a bit much. Naruto grinned under his mask, a sword strapped to his back, the goal of his weekly theft one would say. He had spent the last 3 months doing a different theft every week, making sure to commit his crime where a different hero was close enough to appear. Sometimes, he would come across some of them that nearly captured him, but other times he would actually defeat the hero and take something from them, leaving behind what he had stolen so that he could keep the trophy he wanted. He didn't want anything he stole. What he wanted was trophies from heroes, because it was one thing to steal, but to steal something from a hero and leave behind the object they chased him for. Now that was something else, he would be noticed for that for sure. Week 1. Mirko's gloves. Week 2. Bubble Girl's face mask. Week 3. Fourth Kind's rings. Week 4. Gunhead's vest. Week 5. Mirko's thigh-high socks. Week 6. Ms. Joke's bandana. Week 7. Snipe's cloak. Week 8. Ingenium's helmet. Week 9. Sir Night Eye's glasses. Week 10. Mirko's neck warmer. Week 11. Mirko's hip guards. Week 12. I don't really know who this one is. Naruto realized that week 12 into his trophy collection, he didn't really know who the giant woman chasing him was. He also realized that he had been viciously chased down by Mirko more than the other heroes. He would have taken her gloves multiple times, but she just kept wearing the same type of gloves each time, since heroes all had multiple copies of their same suits. He ended up taking something different from her each time, and all that was left was her leotard. A giant hand slapped the ground, and he rolled out of the way of it just in time, rolling onto his back, with his hands behind his head. Massive, 2062 centimeters tall, with super thick and shiny blonde hair with purple eyes, but with white pupils. A figure many women would kill for, but a skin-tight bodysuit that was about the same color as her skin over most of it, that purple with orange, he loved that, outlines around the orange. She had on a purple eye mask with horns connected to it, not much he could take from her. She was careful to not destroy the concrete completely, but she still ended up doing damages to it. You're the annoying kid who has been in the news the last few months. Mount Lady. Just realized who you were. Wow, your hand is moving down towards me really. Gotcha. Mount Lady slapped her hand down against the ground where he was, silencing him. She used only enough force to gently push him into the ground, not even enough to crack the concrete. She grinned and waved her other hand to the news media when she saw all of her fans were taking pictures of her. Guess he wasn't ready to make my ass quantance. Mount Lady used one of her signature phrases and lifted her other hand up off of the ground, giving the photographers a wiggle of her hips. The villain wasn't below her hand. Fast, gotta let a guy finish what he was saying there honey. Naruto said from her wrist that she had lifted up. He had dodged her slap, and had stuck himself to her wrist, winking at her as he hopped off of her wrist when she slapped it. Landing on her shoulder, he jumped off instantly when her other hand went to slap it. Whoa now, I don't hit women. I think you should extend the same rule to me, right? Guess not then. Naruto landed on the side of her hip, and jumped off onto her knee when she grit her teeth and punched her hip. He was being really annoying, so she jerked her knee and tried to throw him off, but he stayed latched onto her. Get off of me. Mount Lady danced in one spot from the effort of attempting to throw him off. She reached down to grab onto him, but he crawled around her legs so that he was on the back of her thigh. Her hands darted after him. Hey! Mount Lady shouted and gave herself a harsh spank when he crawled onto her ass, and he jumped onto her bicep, before he jumped up so that he landed smack dab in the middle of her face. He landed on her face before he ass was done jiggling. Who is just the cutest pro hero? Naruto reached down, and pat her nose a few times. You are. Naruto continued to baby talk her. She was a rookie hero, so that was going to anger her for sure. Feeling something jet at him from behind, he stopped sticking to her. Mount Lady punched herself in the face with all of her power, knocking herself off of her own 2 feet. Her body and costume started to shrink down in size as she was sent flying, knocked out cold by her own immense strength. Her eyes were already rolled back up into her head, and by the time she hit the ground, she was already mostly down to her real size. Once she was on the ground, she continued to shrink until she was back to a normal 162 centimeters. She groaned, quickly started to regain consciousness, hitting the ground waking her back up. Ooh. That was humiliating. Mount Lady started to get back up, and when she sat back up, Naruto was there. He stuck his fingers right into her mouth, surprising her, but she felt her pulse slow down as the poison took effect quickly. Dropping back down onto her back, Naruto looked at her. Just gonna take this. Naruto grabbed her mask and removed it from her head. Grabbing onto her, he stood up before the press got to their location. What are you doing? It was hard to breathe for Mount Lady, but Naruto jumped with her in his arms, and dropped her off at the top of the nearest building, away from the press. Naruto took his stolen sword, a historical one he took from a museum, and he looked down off the top of the building and saw the press was quickly gathering. Naruto took a deep breath, before he raised the sheathed sword up over his head. Kurama has escaped from the hero once again. I've taken my trophy, so I leave this item behind for the heroes to return to the museum. Naruto called out as he tossed the sword behind him, right on Mount Lady, since the press couldn't see her right now. Naruto turned around and looked down at the unmasked woman. Don't worry Mount Lady, I'm only gave you enough poison to down you for 5 minutes or so. Just enough time for me to make my escape. Naruto walked backwards, before he did a back flip off the other side of the building. Week 12. Mount Lady's mask getting out of his costume, Naruto packed it all away in the front pocket of his hoodie, and dehooded himself as he made his way out of the back of the alley. Blending in with the crowd by the time his eyes had turned from toad eyes to blue ones. He couldn't hide the giddy grin from his lips though, he was just so happy that he could add another trophy to his collection. His fame as a villain was growing. Mirko was really helping him become famous by going after him with such a fury. He wondered what hero he would take on next week. Did you see that? Kurama escaped again. For a villain who keeps getting away with his crimes. It's weird that he keeps returning everything he steals. Naruto grinned when he heard two men on their way to work speak about what he had just done. His fame as Kurama was on the rise, and he was just as famous as he was infamous, because he never actually kept anything he stole from the places he robbed. People were left feeling conflicted about him. He took clothes from heroes, but he never took the devices they used to assist in their quirks, and he never caused permanent damage to them. He took clothes that they easily replaced, and it left a lot of people wondering about what his motives were. Wonder what he took from Mount Lady. She just wears that bodysuit. You think she's, naked? Nah. I wouldn't do that if I wasn't sure she would have a way to get back home without being seen. Naruto wouldn't do that to somebody. His goal wasn't to ruin heroes' lives. He wasn't going to do that, give them a little humiliation maybe. But to do something like ruining their reputation was just not fun. He liked the attention, and he liked being chased by heroes. I'm more interested in why he keeps giving the stuff he takes back. Who wants some ancient stuff, or some weird gadgets I don't know how to use? Nah. I just want my little trophies. I'm gonna hang this one up right next to Mirko's hip guards. Naruto thought, grinning even wider as he signaled to a cab. He was going to get a ride back to his apartment, since he was a pretty far distance away from where he lived. He had to travel outside of his hometown to make this one happen. Naruto looked outside of the cab, glancing around. He saw Kamui Woods rushing onto the scene that he had left behind him. Naruto wondered when Mirko was going to rush to the scene, only to not find him there. She was pretty serious about catching him. SSSSS so fucking cold. Toads hibernated, and the cold was a nightmare to those with quirks that made them like creatures who had to deal with this issue. The cold months had descended on Japan, and Naruto had pretty much been forced to take a small break from his criminal behavior, much to the surprise of the news that reported on his strange disappearance. It would seem that if he wanted to stay in the news, he would have to commit another crime, at least 1 or 3 more if he wanted to make sure not to be forgotten or at least not to have his face vanish from the news completely. Do you hear me out there, Kurama? Just because you're laying low, doesn't mean I haven't forgotten about you. Nah. Naruto huddled up in his blankets, realizing with a grin that because Mirko was so determined to catch him herself, that she wasn't going to let him be forgotten. Every time she was on the news, she would send a message to him about how she was going to catch him. I'm so tired. Naruto laid on his side, and rolled around his bed so that he was wrapped with even more blankets. Maybe he would just sleep until spring. Oni-chan, Ni-chan, we're hungry. There goes that plan. Naruto felt small hands pushing against his blanket fortress against the cold. Naruto unwrapped himself, and he looked down and saw 2 very different-looking children were staring up at him. A little boy who had the appearance of a polar bear, his quirk making him look like a humanoid polar bear. The little girl showed no visible signs of having a quirk, but she was only 3 years old, so she still had time. You can settle down. Buro. Okay, stop. I said stop, you little. Naruto jerked awake more clearly when they didn't stop pushing their hands against his face. More children, between ages 3 and 8, started to come into the room, close to 11 of them in total. Naruto could practically see on their faces just how hungry they were, so standing up, Naruto decided to get to it and make them something to eat. Thanks, Ni-chan. He wasn't their brother, and he wasn't related to any of them by blood, marriage, or anything that would make him any of their siblings. They just called him that, because he was the oldest. And he was the one that did everything for that. Naruto grabbed the smallest one of them, younger than 3, who was just a small baby being held by one of the other ones. Naruto let out a yawn as a baby played with his face, pushing his tiny hands up against his cheeks. Just so you guys know, I'm just making PB&J for all of you, except you. You get milk. Naruto jiggled the baby in his arms, and he was greeted with some cheers. Peanut butter was a luxury, quite expensive in Japan, so the fact he was making it at all showed that he was giving them a little gift for their taste buds. Truthfully though, he was just so tired that he didn't have the energy to make anything else without heating himself up some. Feeding them, that was his job. Kind of. The Uzu orphanage. The orphanage that had been started up by his mother, to help find new families for children with no parents. Well, at least that was what he had heard, since he had never met his mother or father personally. Ironically enough, his parents had died shortly after he was born, and had left him not just a part of the family business, but as a resident of the orphanage as well. While all of the other children were adopted, Naruto never had been, because this was his home in a way. Didn't matter though. He had his parents' dreams on his shoulders, all of the responsibilities they had were his now, and the future of these orphans were on his shoulders. When the caretakers went home for the day, it was up to Naruto to take care of the children after hours, since none of the caretakers needed to stay after hours now that he was old enough to take care of the young children. Ah, Kurama isn't in the news today either. When is he going to do his cool tricks and flips and stuff? Naruto looked at the TV in the playroom as he walked to the kitchen, and saw some kids huddled in front of it. A lot of the children loved watching the news when it was about heroes and villains, while the older kids, 6 to 9 years old, were able to watch it. When regular news stuff played, they turned it back to cartoons. Dinner is coming up soon, so turn that off and get plates set up. Anyway, I'm sure Kurama is going to show up in the news any day now. Naruto rubbed the top of the oldest boy's head with a grin on his face. Next day music. RWBY soundtrack. RWBY vs FNKI. Come on now. Don't make this too easy for me now. Naruto jumped backwards, flipping over a large pink dragon claw that made to grab him. Naruto landed on top of a moving truck, watching as a large pink dragon with spiky blonde hair flew after him, a dragon wearing Chinese-styled combat clothing for a female. You know, you'll be like the third person in the top 10 to give me a victory trophy. Naruto ducked underneath a claw and laid down on his side with an unseen grin. Your reign of villainy ends today. Sexy, dirty talk me some more. Reign of villainy just makes me sound like a king. Naruto teased as he rolled off the side of the truck and onto the street, rolling across the ground as the number 9 hero Ryukyu flew over him, his arms behind his head as he stopped rolling. Ryukyu ended up losing control of her ability to fly as she was forced to stop abruptly, because flying was one thing she could do, but slowing down and stopping at the drop of a dime wasn't easy for something the size of a dragon. Before she hit the ground or the cars in the busy street, she transformed back into a human form. She landed on her feet, facing Naruto's direction as he managed to lay down in the street right between the passing traffic. Do you take anything seriously, or is this all just a game to you? Ryukyu asked as she started to run towards him as he sat up. You know what they say, when it comes to heroes and villains, it takes one of each to play the game. Naruto flipped and landed on the side of a passing truck, because while she ran at him, he rode the truck and passed by her. Sup, don't mind me, just hitching a ride. Naruto winked at the driver of the truck, who had his window rolled down to enjoy the brisk air, something Naruto didn't really agree with. Naruto looked and saw Ryukyu had already transformed, and was chasing after him again. Looking ahead, Naruto saw his target. You won't be thinking this is a game when you're in jail. Ryukyu quickly gained ground on Naruto as he made his way to the top of the truck. Naruto leaned near the edge of the truck though and glanced to the side. Her hand was feet away from grabbing Naruto, when he raised his hands up and allowed himself to fall over the edge of the truck. Right when it passed by a bridge, meaning Naruto fell off the side of the bridge as well, towards the icy cold water down below. When he vanished from sight, Ryukyu flapped her wings and slowed down, before she changed directions and flew off the side of the bridge. She transformed into her human form and landed on the dead grass next to the water. Turning around sharply, she didn't see any hint of the villain she was chasing. She felt a hand on her shoulder though. Her eyes widened and she looked up, seeing her target drop down from the bottom of the bridge above them. Before she could transform, she was already reaching up to her head to activate her quirk. He shoved a handful of fingers into her mouth. She felt all of her strength quickly leave her body, and she dropped down on her face. What is your quirk? Ryukyu couldn't help but find it hard to connect the dots between the traits of his quirk. Naruto just reached into his pocket, and pulled out the item he stole, something personal of Ryukyu's, an antique watch from so many years ago that it was worth a fortune. Naruto put it next to her head, before he grabbed her headband from her hair, and pulled it off. Naruto looked at her shivering in the cold, before he also took a blanket he had in his backpack, and he draped it over her. The poison will wear off soon enough. This will keep you warm until you can go home. I understand your pain. Naruto ignored her question and saluted her. Standing up, and looking towards the news who had arrived at the side of the bridge, Naruto gave a large bow to his audience. Another day, another trophy, and my dear Ryukyu here will always remember this as a day she won't be able to forget. Naruto jumped into the water next to him, and vanished underneath the currents. Later, Kurama is so cool. Naruto sat on the couch behind the children watching the video of what he had done today, absolutely huddled up in blankets and completely shivering. Jumping into the icy water had been a huge mistake, and it had nearly cost him big, even though it was a cool escape. Doing it had nearly put him to sleep on the spot, but thankfully he had been a little prepared and was wearing warming pads under his clothes. They saved his life and allowed him to get to a dry spot out of the view of the cameras. For hours though now, he had been unable to do much of anything, the cold was still getting to him that badly. Naruto grinned down at the children, though they couldn't see him do it since their eyes were glued to the TV. Now, he was going to take a few weeks to recover from this. Oh, Kurama and Mirko are at it again. The citizens of the city of Tokyo were greeted once more to the sight of Mirko giving a heated chase after the rising star of villains Kurama. A few teenagers had taken to start wearing orange hoodies because of how cool the new villain was, and some clothing items were becoming really popular because of it. You can catch him, Mirko. She's got nothing on you, Kurama. Show her that you are just way too slippery. Naruto grinned as he back-flipped over a crowd of people, and Mirko landed in front of him. She spun in the air and kicked at him, spinning around and throwing a punch at him the second he kick missed. Naruto had updated his villain costume. Instead of wearing a medical mask like usual, he had actually bought a black mask to cover the lower half of his face and neck. Since it was the dead middle of the winter, this was not only to make him look cooler, but to also keep him warmer through the cold months. Mirko was really on fire with her combos. She threw her power around, and her speed was nothing to scoff at either. Naruto's agility though wasn't something that was easy to handle, even for the hero who dealt with him more than any other hero. His agility wasn't a threat, were it not for the fact that he was so unpredictable, not having the usual thought process of a villain. Mirko was grinning. You're heading down to jail with me, punk. Mirko put her hands on the ground, and did the splits, spinning around and throwing a dozen fast kicks his direction. Naruto leaned backwards, and she fired off a downward kick, so he flipped as she shattered concrete. She was wearing replacements for all of the costume parts that he had stolen, and he had stolen multiple copies of things from her, but never the leotard. He had never escaped her in a place where he could steal that without leaving her naked in public. Naruto's grin was more easily visible through his current mask. Ah, Bun, I really do love it when you're feisty. Naruto leaned forward as she corrected her posture, and tapped his finger against the tip of her nose. With her teeth, she made to bite him, but he jerked his hand back. Now that was just rude. Here I am. Naruto sidestepped a punch aimed at his face, and spun around and swung her leg after. Ducking her kick, he reached up and grabbed her leg, her power throwing him into the air. Just loving that cute whittle-button nose you have, and you attack me. Naruto grabbed onto the traffic signal, spun around, and balanced on top of it. Mirko blushed in anger, covering her nose with her hand even as she jumped towards Naruto again, landing on the traffic signal with him. She was agile too, and she was able to continue fighting even on the cramped space. Hey punk. What the hell are you even doing as a villain? If you're so skilled, why the hell aren't you applying for a hero school? Instead of causing all this trouble. Mirko uncovered her nose and started to throw some punches. Her arms weren't even close to as strong as her legs, but she had enough strength in her muscle to hurt a grown man with ease. Naruto dodged by slipping so that he was standing upside down, defying gravity as he looked upwards at Mirko. She jumped off the side and used her hands to hang onto the traffic signal, before she started to throw kicks at him as she hung. He dodged as if he were standing the right way up. I think the real question is, why are you still single? Men too afraid of being choked out by your thighs? Let me tell you, that isn't the worst way to go. Naruto avoided the question completely as he teased her some more. Mirko watched him drop and land in the back of a moving truck, so she swung around and soared through the air, landing in the bed of the truck after him. No, seriously, if you were a serious villain, I'm pretty sure a ton of heroes would be dead. You would be a real threat to heroes if you weren't so weird for a villain. Mirko couldn't understand why anyone would waste such skill on something like collecting hero trophies like this. She would say theft, but he never actually completed his thefts. He returned the item he stole every time, because they were never his objective. The other heroes just think you're some punk, or an annoying kid, but on your debut as a villain, you took me down. You've never thrown a single punch at a single hero, or threatened even a single civilian. Mirko had never seen this villain attack even a single person, even when they were attacking him. He only ever evaded them until he was able to take them down in a rather non-violent way. Even now, he jumped off the truck when she aimed a high kick at his chin. He rolled across the street and onto the sidewalk, and she was quick to follow him, and try to slam her foot into his chest. What? His non-violence aside, she still wanted to hurt him for escaping her so many times. I've never really been in a fight, and it doesn't sound like fun to hurt people. Naruto did answer that at least as rolled from his back to his feet. It was getting a lot harder to escape Mirko. She was getting used to the way he evaded her. Usually, he would have already given her a kiss and knocked her out. Mirko, since she was the first person that he escaped from, was something of a special hero. He liked to finish her off the same way each time, an almost chaste kiss to the lips. She was grinning when she realized the same thing as him. Having a hard time. Of course I'm going to be hard, you keep showing off those thighs and ass all the time. Naruto made a joke of her statement. He didn't want to show any of the other abilities of his quirk relating to his toad nature. The more he revealed about his quirk, the easier it would be for them to try and find him because of the quirk registry. It's Kurama and Mirko. In person. Gonna be late for work, yeah, a hero and villain are going at it. It was hard for people not to notice them as Naruto made a show of weaving his way through her attacks. Naruto felt the heat pads under his clothes start to lose the heat they were giving him, and he had to grin. Ah. Shit. Mirko whispered when she saw a scream, and saw a flipped car was rolling across the street towards a group of people crossing the road. She abandoned her prey, and rushed towards the truck. The truck was spinning and flipping out of control, showing that somebody had decided to ignore the speed limit under the icy road conditions. She braced herself, and stared down the truck as it slammed into her. She dug her feet into the street, and was pushed back, slowing down the truck with her body before it could hit the crowd of people that were behind her. The crowd behind her was safe. The driver wasn't though, he had been sent flying out of the front window when she had used her body as a shield. Her feet dug firmly into the street, and her body stuck in the metal truck and slightly injured, she would be unable to stop the man from flying into incoming traffic. The driver wasn't hit by a car though. Naruto, without even thinking about it, jumped towards the man and grabbed him by the back of his shirt, throwing him out of the way of the truck. He was not going to be injured. Naruto had thrown him a clear 20 feet away, so he was going to be hurt, but he wasn't as hurt as Naruto was going to be. Hit by the truck that nearly killed the man, Naruto knocked into the air behind the truck, before he was run over by a second car that rolled over him. Cars came skidding to a halt moments later. Shit. Mirko whispered when she saw her target was unmoving on the ground, her eyes starting to widen as traffic came to a screeching halt. She dug herself out of the street, her forearms bruised and possibly broken from taking the brunt of the force of the truck. She ran towards the villain's body and saw him laying face down on the other. Turning him over, she saw his eyes were closed. Naruto's eyes shot open and he leaned up, lowering his mask when his face was too close for her to see it clearly, and he planted a kiss on her lips. Pulling his mask up before she could see it, the poison took effect and she collapsed on the ground next to him. Naruto looked down at Mirko now that she could barely move, and he tapped the tip of her nose. Just kidding, and I'll be taking this. And giving this back to you. Naruto stood up and tossed her a new phone that he stole, after he took her fuzzy neck warmer again. Standing up and winking down at her, Naruto jumped up to the top of the nearest building as more heroes started to arrive. You punk. I'll get you. Several minutes later. Oh my god, this hurts so much. Fuck. Shit. Damn, this was the closest chase yet. But damn wasn't it fun. Naruto grinned as he looked at the bruises that were forming on his chest and back, where he had gotten hit by a truck, and run over by a car. His body had moved on its own, and this was the price he had to pay for his act of heroism. Maybe next time I'll go see how much luck goes with Eraserhead or Midnight. I haven't taken anything from them. Ooh. Naruto groaned in pain. Forcing himself to stand up, Naruto started to walk normally, out of costume, in the direction of the orphanage. Right now, The caretakers were on duty, so they were watching the kids, but it was approaching 6, and the kids needed somebody to help them with their homework, and make them a snack before they went to bed. He was going to be hurting tomorrow. I've got ice. Naruto, coming home from the store, raised his hands up with a grin on his face, had his grin completely vanish from his face when he saw a pro hero was sitting amongst the children in the middle of the room. Naruto almost dropped his bags when he saw it was a famous pro hero at his home. And he was a villain. Also, a very seductive hero. Oh great, these kids were just telling me about how great of a big brother you are. I can see why. The taller than him woman, even without heels on, which were at the front of the door with the rest of the shoes, spoke as she rubbed the head of one of the young boys who had his head resting on her thighs. She had long, spiked black hair, and the same shade of blue eyes as him. She wore a tight bodysuit underneath her BDSM gear, her hero outfit, which complemented her seriously attractive body. She looked naked since the skinsuit was the same color as her skin, just a shade lighter. Midnight, the 18+ only hero. He was a teenage boy, naturally he knew who this bombshell was. Ni-chan, Oni-chan. Naruto was surrounded by children, other than the smiling boy who was having his hair pet by Midnight. Naruto didn't take his eyes off of Midnight for even a second, and she just smiled at him and gently pushed the boy off her lap. Naruto started to hand out small tubs of ice cream and plastic spoons to the children, handing each their favorite ice cream. A hero at this little orphanage. I'm surprised, usually it's the other places that get visits from heroes. Naruto forced a smile on his face. Naruto blinked and did a head count, noticing that the triplets were missing. Where are Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest at? Naruto used his affectionate names for the triplets. Naruto averted his eyes from Midnight. Now only 3 ice cream tubs, small-sized, left in the bag. They got adopted. Ah. Good for them. Naruto smiled wide when he heard that. A couple adopting all 3 of the triplets was great for them, not being forced apart from their siblings. I guess there are extras now though. Naruto glanced over at Midnight, who was walking towards him and reached into the bag, taking a cup out. These look just. Midnight licked her lips sensually. Delicious. Midnight gave her shot at teasing Naruto, breaking the ice so to say. She saw his guard was still up higher than most teenage boys, so she just peeled the top off the ice cream and used the small spoon to take a bite. They were extras, he wouldn't mind. I'm sure a hero like you isn't just here to talk to kids. Naruto looked at her with a smile, because glaring wouldn't do him any good. The fact she hadn't told the kids who he was, the only natural reason she was there, was a good thing for him. She's here to see you. That's right, I'm here just for you. Midnight poked him in the forehead. Can we speak in private? Midnight asked normally, and Naruto stood up straighter and nodded his head. He had his own personal room in the orphanage, since it used to be his parents' room when they would stay late at night to take care of children. There is fresh snow on the ground. Why don't all of you go build some snowmen? Naruto's suggestion was instantly appreciated by the children, as they ran to their rooms to go and get changed into their snow gear. When the children were all gone, Naruto turned back to Midnight. We can talk in my room. Naruto gestured for her to follow him. He had to find out a way to worm his way out of her grasp. As Midnight followed him, he was sure that he could feel her hero urge to arrest him rising. My hair is dark purple by the way, not the black you were thinking earlier. Common mistake. I see it in cute boys' eyes all the time. Midnight spoke as they reached Naruto's room. Naruto turned his head and glanced at her with a confused look. What? I'm sorry. What? Everyone always calls my hair black, it's just a really dark purple. Common mistake, it's not really that big a deal, like how people mix up frogs and toads all the time. Midnight explained with a wide smile on her face, sadistic in nature. Do you need me to wait outside while you hide your porn mags? Midnight asked him with a cocky smirk on her face. Wait outside just a moment. Oh, an honest one. I like that, that is a youthful teenage boy right there. Midnight pat him on the top of the head. Naruto snuck into his room without letting her see inside of it. He rushed over to his bed, and looked at his most recent trophy that he had gotten himself. Eraserhead's capture scarf. He had been something that he had a lot of trouble stealing, with Eraserhead making it difficult to use his quirk normally, but he had taken it. How did Midnight find out who he was? Naruto grabbed all of his hero trophies he had around the room, and threw them into the closet. Naruto closed, and locked up, his closet. tossing his own villain costume into the closet as well. Okay, you can come in. Naruto called out, and he sat down on the bed, his hand slipping underneath his pillow and touching his hidden knife. Midnight walked in with a seductive hip sway, before she sat down at the chair in front of his desk, turning it to face him as she crossed her legs. So, you've been skipping school a lot. I'm just here to check to see if you're alright, and talk with you about getting you back on the right track. Naruto's hand came out from under his pillow. Oh, that. I've just got a lot on my plate with this place. I'm going to own this place in a few years anyway, and run it like my parents, so school isn't important. Naruto relaxed a lot more now that he realized that this wasn't about him being a villain, that maybe Midnight didn't even know that he was Kurama. It was a lot easier to relax with her in the same room. That was right, as she pointed out, he skipped school a lot. He actually went to school maybe once or twice every week. He skipped a lot. Education is important, and high school isn't just for learning, it's a place where you'll gain some of your best memories of your teenage years. Your toad quirk is pretty amazing, and in physical education, you've got top marks. I even talked with your teachers, and they said you're always helping people around your school. With your looks, attitude, and good quirk, I'm sure a hero high school would be perfect for you. Midnight explained a little more seriously, not an ounce of seductive purr to her tone. They were down to the issue at hand, the reason why she had been asked to help him out. She was good at getting young men to do what she wanted them to, and she was even better when it came to helping them steer their life in a better direction. I'm just not suited for it. Looking at how good you are with children, and your reputation around this area for giving people help when they ask, I would actually say you have the perfect disposition for hero work. Of course, it is your choice. But it would really be a shame. You're such a handsome young man, and being a hero would really give these children hope for the future. Midnight let out a small, this time seductive, sigh as she lowered her mask and bit the edge of it. This move always got guys to be putty in her hands. And end up putting them all in danger, because a villain wanted to attack them to hurt me? I'm not suited to being a hero, because I can't put their lives in danger. I want them to have a future. Naruto didn't even need to use his villain status as an excuse, his words rang true enough. Heroes were often subject to praise and admiration, but if he became a hero, and his real name ever became known, villains would attack the children he looked after. Midnight's eyes widened at his reason, before she nodded her head in complete understanding. That was an extremely well thought out reason. That's a shame. Not all villains can be like Kurama, good people who just like to have a little fun. Midnight sighed and figured she should give up trying to get Naruto into a hero school. His reasons were good, he did have a future ahead of him even without schooling. Now that's a look. Midnight realized that Naruto was sending her a surprised look. You're a hero. You said something nice about Kurama. Well, other than a few heroes with extreme views, most of us have already realized Kurama is just a boy looking for attention. He always returns what he steals, and the stuff he takes from heroes are so easy for us to replace it isn't even a bother. He seems like a good kid to me, he just likes to have fun. Sadly, he uses his quirk in public and does commit crime, and it is a hero's job to catch villains. Midnight admitted that she, among with many others, didn't really hold any real negative feelings towards Naruto, though she didn't know Kurama and Naruto were the same person. They had a job they had to do, and using your quirk to commit crimes was something a hero wasn't allowed to ignore. He's like you in a way, a boy with serious potential, but didn't choose the life of a hero. Midnight finished off with a comparison. Just using your quirk in public would get you a warning from a police officer, not even that if your quirk was super harmless. Using your quirk in a way that disrupts the public though was a big no-no, and was usually met with hero intervention. Do you have any leads on him? Like his identity? Naruto asked with a little more confidence in his voice. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But if you find out anything, be sure to let me know. You know, I'm surprised you haven't been adopted. Your file said that you didn't just help run the place, but you were up for adoption. Midnight hadn't even remembered that until she realized they were still in an orphanage, and what Naruto's age was. You must be under a lot of stress, a boy your age helping take care of so many children. I hope you can find a way to release that stress. Midnight thought she was teasing him when she put her hand on her whip, and teased the tip. Naruto just grinned. Several days later. Have no idea. What's up, Midnight? You just have no idea what I go through to get these, do you? Naruto asked in costume as he looked down at Midnight, a grin under his mask. He dropped down from the ceiling and tossed up a large diamond into the air. Seriously, it wasn't easy to do this. So, what R-rated secrets do you want to whisper into my ear? Naruto asked her as he tossed the diamond up into the air a few more times, before catching it and putting it into the front of his hoodie. Oh, a boy with sass. That just sets my sadistic side on fire. I'm going to teach you a lesson, and then I'll give you a special treat. Midnight flirted with him as she reached up and ripped part of her suit off, a light pink gas spilling out of her skin, uncontained by the suit. It started to fill the area, and covered Naruto in the gas. Naruto just grinned under his mask. You're wasting your time, your gas won't reach my lungs so easy. Naruto spoke as he grabbed her whip when she took a swing at him. Naruto spoke, but he never once breathed in through his mouth or nose when he did it. He's got a resistance to my quirk. This might be a little more of a challenge. Good thing I know how to hero without my quirk, since it's not very effect on women either. Midnight wrapped her hand around the side of her whip, and yanked on it. She pulled the thief off his feet and towards her, only for his feet to touch the ceiling and stick to it, right above where she was standing. So, what is a cutie like you doing as a villain? A little stress relief, a fun prankster. A boy with mommy issues who wants a nice older lady to punish him. Midnight snapped her whip as she pulled it back. Naruto let loose a loud laugh as he dropped down from the ceiling in front of her, and grabbed onto her wrist. She closed her mouth tightly, sending him a smirk, before he gripped her exposed bicep. He let go of her and jumped back when she tried to slap him, and he turned around and spanked his own behind to taunt her. Come and give me a spanking, Oni-chan. Fine, if you insist. Midnight raised her whip up, before it fell out of her grip, and she dropped to her knees, sitting down on her butt moments later. How? You didn't get your poison in my mouth? Midnight asked with her eyes widening. She made sure he didn't touch her mouth. Naruto showed his ungloved hands. I can adjust the danger levels of the poison from completely harmless to fatal. But I never said that it had to be ingested. Skin-to-skin contact is all I need to put a person down. Though it isn't easy to get the perfect dose. Naruto stated with a grin, showing white poison dripping from the palm of his hand like sweat. Shaking the poison from his hand, Naruto walked over to Midnight, and leaned down to her level. Midnight just grinned a little at him. Gonna take my mask? Midnight asked him. Go ahead. What he didn't know was that she already bugged her mask with a tracker, so that she could find him. She was surprised when he slipped her heels off, and took her stockings, before putting her heels back on her. He even looked over them, she still grinned, before she was surprised when he reached into them and pulled out the trackers in them, small little things. You heroes really need to keep your meeting times a secret. I already know about the bugs. And despite what my quirk is, I'm not a fan of bugs. Naruto told her, and she blinked in confusion. What? His quirk was poison creation, wasn't it? Smack. Hey now. Ah, but you've been a bad girl. Still, in your 30s and still single. Might want to think about finding yourself a man with prospects. Who knows, maybe somebody can see if the carpets match those purple drapes soon. Naruto teased her as he jumped out of the window, shattering the glass, leaving a very confused Midnight behind. Now she had to know who this villain really was. Also, she wasn't old. Midnight, you're certainly staying up late. Be sure to get some rest, okay? You'll be a teacher at UA this year, and you'll still be doing your hero duties, so you've got to make sure to stay well rested. Midnight was sitting in front of a computer, but she also had her phone on a stand on her desk, and she was speaking with her father over the phone on video chat. She had just answered the phone, and looking down at herself, she realized that she had never gotten out of her costume. Her father was just teasing her a little, of course, but she took her mask off and put her regular glasses on, and she still a sweater on over her hero outfit. She would get changed out of her hero costume when her father hung up. So, how have you been, my little flower? I've just been doing some research. Some stuff that Kurama said to me a few weeks ago has been stuck in my head. I've contacted the Public Records Office to get permission to go through their files in the search for who he might be. Midnight stated as she rubbed her cheek, staring at the computer screen in front of her. Since Kurama never revealed a lot about his quirk, other than the poison aspect of it, people just assumed his ability to jump across buildings was him using thick poison to stick to walls. Oh, Kurama, he's a funny one. He seems a lot like a kid who just wants a little attention. His parents must not pay any attention to him at home, or teach him any better. Poison, sticking to walls, and he made a joke about bugs. In Japan, even when I narrow it down, there are still hundreds of people with quirks that cover these basics. There is the Asui family, all of them have the frog quirk. Midnight explained it to her father. There were dozens of people with the frog quirk, multiple dozens on both sides of the Asui family, who had a tradition of producing a ton of people with that quirk. There were a dozen of animal-related quirks that allowed for all of those basics, and she was able to narrow it down a little by searching only through the males who were between 13 and 17 years old. Still, she had dozens of suspects even as she looked through those names as well. I don't understand your hero work. Speaking of family, when are you going to settle down and start one of your own? I want to hug a grandchild before my time comes. Her father spoke with a firm tone, and Midnight sputtered for a moment in shock, having not expected that. I'm not that old. You're already 30, dear, and you're not getting any younger. When I was your age, you were already 3 years old, and let me tell you something, and it was a miracle. We adopted a child, thinking we couldn't have one, and then you were a happy surprise a few months later. I miss your brother. Her father seemed saddened as he remembered her older brother, though both her brother and her mother had passed away in a villain attack. She nodded her head in agreement, since she missed them too. It was just her and her father in the family now. I'm just fine, and I'm not old yet. I'm just not super young is all. I can't afford to settle down right now, or take care of a baby. With pro hero work and being a teacher, I just don't have the time to raise a child who needs a lot of attention. Midnight blinked a few times, before a wide smile started to cross her features. She looked through the list of people with quirks that would fit the bill of what Kurama's quirk might be. Naruto Uzumaki. Though, he couldn't be Kurama, since Kurama had yellow eyes with bar pupils, and their personalities were different. Not to mention, Naruto spent most of his time at the orphanage with the kids he helped out with. Still, seeing his name in the list, and her talk with her father, combined with her own thoughts, had given her a very great idea. A few weeks later, man, this one sucked. You're without a doubt the closest one to having captured me. But still no dice. Naruto sucked in his breath, poison dripping from any part of his exposed skin. Once more, he had been faced with another member of the top 10. This time the number 10 hero, Gang Orca, a very large man with a body that looked similar to a killer whale, with all the abilities of a killer whale to back up his appearance. He was strong, fast, and the way he could paralyze somebody with sonic waves had been tricky, though thankfully his own toad abilities also made him stronger, faster, and more durable than a normal person. Also, since his quirk included toad abilities, including creating sound waves of his own that he had been able to use to neutralize Gang Orca's hypersonic waves, and prevent himself from being paralyzed by them. Just what is your quirk? Gang Orca asked politely as he laid down on the ground, his face against the concrete. All of his sidekicks were surrounding him as well, after he had gone down in the battle, though, his opponent never actually threw an attack. They had tried to capture Kurama for him, only to fall to the poison as well. Poison alone can't neutralize my sound waves, or enhance your body to be as fast or evasive as you are. Gang Orca looked out of the side of his eye at the one who defeated him. Naruto looked down at him, and took his trophy, his red tie, and put it into his pocket, before he calmed down his breath. Now that would be. Naruto's phone started to go off, and he looked at it, and saw it was one of the caretakers from the orphanage. That was weird. They usually never called him until they wanted him to go and get something for the kids while he was out and about. Naruto jumped up and landed on the side of the building, before he started to hop higher and higher, until he was on the top of a taller building in the area. Sup, you're speaking with Naruto, what you need? Naruto answered his phone now that he was out of earshot of any heroes. Where are you right now? Just taking a walk, gotta stay in shape and all that jazz. Why are you calling me? Shouldn't you be taking care of the kids? Naruto asked, since they had a job to do, and they should be doing their job instead of wasting time talking to him. Yeah, it was technically their job to take care of him, but in a few years, he would be their boss. The relationship between him and the caretakers was an odd one. They made sure never to get on his bad side since it could affect their job in the future. How fast can you get back here? Odd. Ever since he became a teen, they never really set a curfew on him or asked him to come back just to come back. Hey, I've got a bone to pick with you. Give me maybe 30 minutes. 45 possibly, I wandered kind of far away. Naruto stated as he jumped back when he saw Mirko jump up to the top of the building. Naruto hung up his phone and put it back into his pocket, before he looked and saw Mirko land right in front of him. Sup bun bun. I've already returned what I stole, and took my trophy from Gang Orca. And I don't have a lot of time left to play today. Can we time this for same time next week? Naruto asked her as he gestured off the building right down towards the poisoned Gang Orca and his gang of poisoned heroes. Mirko's eye twitched, and she pounded a fist into her open palm. The answer was, grr. Whatever. It's not like I wanted to chase you anyway. You better commit a crime next week, at this time, in this city though. And don't get caught by any other heroes before I catch you. Mirko growled at him in a half-shouting tone. She relaxed her shoulders, though she had flushed cheeks as well. Well. Thanks for under. Mirko grabbed him by the hoodie, and pulled him into a searing kiss, glaring into his eyes, slipping her tongue into his mouth. She let go of him and disconnected, before she stepped back. Naruto was shocked when he watched her go faint from taking some of his poison. His body was still coated in a fresh layer of poison he had yet to allow to fade thanks to his recent encounter with Gang Orca. I'm still a pro-hero dumbass. Mirko collapsed onto her side, and glared up at him. If I let a criminal escape, while being able to chase them, I would be a failure as a hero. I might not be able to move, but this time it was me who kissed you. You got that? Mirko glared up at him, making sure to put emphasis on her words just so that he understood. He didn't steal a kiss from her today. Nope. Today she got him back and took it from him, and he didn't defeat her either. She used his poison to defeat herself. She didn't lose, she took herself out of the game. There was a difference. Then. I guess I'll be off then. Naruto jumped off the side of the building, since he didn't know what to say to that. Mirko was weird today. Later, I'm back. So what do you need me for? Naruto asked as he walked into the main office without feeling the need to knock on the door when he entered. He saw a somewhat familiar head of dark purple hair, but done up in a spiky ponytail, and she was out of her hero costume. She actually looked pretty different while wearing a non-sexual office dress that covered her body up decently like a working adult. Sadly for her, though he didn't know her real name, Naruto could recognize Midnight by the sound of her voice alone. Toad quirk. Being able to tell the difference between voices was a mini ability. Oh, hello Naruto. We were introduced a few weeks ago, but this will be your first time meet the real me, not the pro-hero Midnight. I'm Namori Kayama. Midnight introduced herself by her real name to Naruto, since she was out of costume. Midnight, no Namori, got up and gave a normal bow to Naruto. She extended her hand to him, and he took it. The poison on his body had already dried up until he released some more, making him safe to touch for the moment. I thought I said I wasn't going to go to UA. Naruto told her. She nodded. Well, I was talking with my own father, and I'm already 30. It's time I settled down and started my own family. But as a pro-hero and teacher, I just don't have the time to raise a baby. But there isn't a law saying that your first child has to be a baby. Namori explained with a growing smile. Oh. Naruto realized and a large grin came over his face. Well, there are a ton of really good kids here. I can give you a tour, and you can pick from them. They've all got really cool quirks, and I've made sure they're really well behaved. Naruto hadn't expected her here to adopt, and if that was the case, he would make sure to match her up with the perfect child for her. He grabbed her by the wrist, and started to pull her. I'll take you to the girls' rooms first. As a single woman, a girl might be better for your lifestyle. But if you're looking for a boy, we've got really good boys here too. Naruto was excited. Another of his kiddos was getting a real home today, and starting their new lives with a family of their own, instead of their little makeshift family, one that was always falling apart. I've already picked. Oh. Well, that is cool too, just tell me their name and I'll go. Naruto Uzumaki. No. I'm too old, nobody wants me. My quirk is Toad, totally lame, and I'm going to turn 16 this year. Naruto stated as he waved her off. She was joking. This was his home, the place his parents built together. It was his destiny to be here forever, taking in kids and finding them homes. You're also up for adoption, like any child here. The head caretaker spoke to Naruto from behind the front desk. Naruto was stunned. Namori smiled. You're right, you're 15. You're old enough to understand I won't always have time for you, and you're a good kid. You should be allowed to experience your own youth. So I adopted you. It's not much, but welcome to my small family. Namori smiled and extended her arms to hug Naruto. When she had met him weeks ago, She had thought it was sad that a young boy was being forced to spend his time looking after others, instead of being allowed to chase his own dreams, and take care of children that would just leave him. Kurama mocking her, and her father calling her to ask her about her settling down, had made her remember Naruto and the orphanage. Then, she remembered that everyone could win if she adopted him. Her father would have a grandson, she would have started a family with a son that was mature enough to not need all of her attention, and Naruto would gain a family with her so that she could give him her unspent maternal love. Naruto wasn't smiling, and he didn't even make a move to hug her. You. Naruto looked at the caretaker with fury in his eyes. Just like any child, you're up for adoption. If a viable parent wishes to adopt you, they can do so. Though, since you were adopted, your father's will states that this orphanage will transfer to the government so that you can fully enjoy your new family. Naruto stopped shaking. Fine. I'm not taking your name though. If my name is the only thing I'm keeping from my parents, I'm not going to lose that. Naruto spat out, his words as harsh as poison. Nemori's smile softened. She didn't say anything though. Though she knew this was what was best for him, so that he could actually experience life, she knew this was going to be a very hard transition for him. She was changing his life, a life he had become accustomed to, but she was old enough, though still young, to have the life experience to know that he needed more experience in life, to see if this was the path he really wanted to take. Hopefully, he would come around and see it her way. Thank you.